I never thought that at 67, I would have to relearn the meaning of respect and dignity. My name is Márcia Vasconcelos, I'm from Florianopolis, and throughout my life, I believed that a child's love was unconditional. I was wrong. The sun was shining that Saturday morning, a day that should have been a celebration. I spent hours getting ready, choosing the navy blue dress I had bought especially for the occasion, styling my gray hair into an elegant bun, applying the wine-colored lipstick I saved for special moments. I looked in the mirror, and despite my age and the wrinkles on my face, I felt beautiful, worthy, a proud mother heading to her eldest son's wedding. That day, I was not just Márcia, the widow, the retired economics professor from the Federal University. I was the mother of the groom, the one who raised 2 children alone after losing her husband to a sudden heart attack 20 years ago. The one who saved every penny of her salary, who gave up new clothes, trips, and little luxuries to ensure that Rodrigo and Vicente received a good education. The event space, Jardim Atlântico, looked like something out of a fairy tale. White flowers everywhere, crystals reflecting the sunlight, champagne glasses being served to elegantly dressed guests, family, friends, colleagues, all gathered to celebrate the union of Rodrigo and Camila, the daughter-in-law who never looked me in the eye, from the wealthy Mendonça family of São Paulo, who always made it clear how much I didn't belong to their social circle. Still, I smiled. It was my son's day, and I was happy for him, even though deep down, I felt something was off. Ever since he started dating Camila, Rodrigo had changed. Sunday visits to my apartment downtown became rare, and the phone calls were brief. The affectionate look was replaced by an impatient expression, as if my mere presence bothered him. I brushed it all aside. "It's normal," my friend Teresa said, trying to console me. "Children grow up, gain their independence. He's just building his own life." I sat in the front row, a spot reserved for the groom's family. Next to me, Vicente, my youngest son, a teacher like me, squeezed my hand in support. He knew. Somehow, he always knew that this wedding represented more than just a union. It was the materialization of the chasm growing between Rodrigo and me. The ceremony was beautiful, I can't deny it. Camila entered stunning in her designer gown, strutting down the red carpet as if she were on a Paris runway. Rodrigo waited for her at the altar, looking sharp in his tailored suit. They exchanged vows, rings, and sealed their union with a passionate kiss, enthusiastically applauded by the guests. I cried, as any mother would, out of joy, yes, but also from a sadness I couldn't name. It was at the reception that everything happened. I had approached Rodrigo to greet him, to tell him how proud I was, to hand him an envelope with the papers for the house I planned to buy for them as a wedding gift. A house worth nearly 2 million reais in a gated community. Their dream that I would finance using all my savings and part of my retirement. The contract with the bank was already signed, just waiting for final approval. "Son, congratulations." I began approaching him with the envelope in hand. But before she could finish, Camila shot a glance at her mother Julia, who smiled with disdain. Rodrigo, clearly uncomfortable with my presence, stepped away from his in-laws and pulled me by the arm to a more secluded corner of the hall. "What are you doing?" he whispered, his face twisted in a way I had never seen before. "You can't just show up like this and interrupt my conversation with Camila's parents." "But son, I just wanted to give you the PRI, no." He cut me off, raising his voice. A few heads turned in our direction. "You don't get it, do you? You don't realize how much you embarrass me with those simple clothes, that public school teacher vibe?" I felt like I had been slapped. Words failed me, and my eyes filled with tears. "Rodrigo," was all I could manage to say. "Look, Mom," he continued, his voice choked with alcohol and anger I couldn't understand. "You're a piece of work, you know? A complete mess. I didn't want you here. I didn't need your presence. Camila tried to convince me not to invite you, and I should have listened to her." Each word was a blade piercing my heart. The hall seemed to spin around me. I felt Vicente's hand on my shoulder. He had approached upon noticing the argument, but it wasn't enough to stop the world from collapsing around me. I just wanted to give you this, I murmured, extending the envelope with the house papers. My gift for you. Rodrigo snatched the envelope, tore it open violently, and upon seeing what it was, let out a bitter laugh. A house? You think this makes up for years of emotional absence, for making me feel like a failure for not having a present father? You think I need your charity? He ripped the papers in front of me, the pieces falling like dead leaves on the polished floor of the hall. At that moment, Camila approached, linking her arm with Rodrigo's, a triumphant smile on her lips. Is there a problem, love? She asked, looking me up and down. None, Rodrigo replied coldly. My mom was just about to leave, right, Mom? I couldn't respond. Tears streamed silently down my face, ruining the makeup I had so carefully applied hours earlier. Vicente tried to intervene, but I stopped him with a gesture. This wasn't the time or place for more conflict. I left the hall with the little dignity I had left, feeling the guest stares burning into my back. Teresa accompanied me to the car, worried about my state. It was during that silent drive back home, as the city lights blurred past the window, that I made my decision. I entered my apartment, tossed my bag on the sofa, and without even changing clothes, grabbed the phone. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady when I dialed the bank manager's number. Good evening. This is Márcia Vasconcelos. I need to cancel the mortgage I signed earlier today. No, it's not a mistake. I'm no longer buying the house for my son. I hung up the phone and, for the first time that night, took a deep breath. The air filled my lungs like a revelation. The pain was still there, pulsing, alive, but alongside it, something new began to emerge. A spark of indignation, of long-forgotten self-love. A strength I didn't know I had. That night, while Rodrigo and Camila danced their first dance as husband and wife, I was making the first of many decisions that would completely change our lives. What my son didn't know is that behind the image of a fragile and submissive mother, there was a woman he never truly knew. A woman who would no longer accept being called garbage by anyone, not even by the son she loved so much. That night was the longest of my life. Sitting in the green velvet chair that had belonged to my late husband, I stared into the void until the sun began to rise. Rodrigo's words echoed in my mind like a scratched record. You are garbage. How could a son say that to his own mother on his wedding day in front of everyone? The call to the bank was just the beginning. After a night at Sony, I took a long shower, trying to wash away not just my body, but the humiliation that felt glued to my skin. I put on simple clothes and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The apartment felt bigger, quieter. The photographs of Rodrigo scattered across the walls and furniture suddenly seemed strange, as if they depicted a stranger. I sat at the table with my steaming cup and began to recall every moment. After Alberto's death, my husband, I was left alone to raise 2 boys. Rodrigo was 12, Vicente only 8. The insurance left by Alberto helped at first, but it wouldn't be enough. I had to increase my hours at the university, give private lessons on weekends, give up any personal comfort. I remember one Christmas when Rodrigo was 15 and asked for an imported video game that was all the rage. It cost 3 times my university tuition. I saved for months, cut expenses, sold some jewelry that had belonged to my mother. On Christmas Day, seeing the package under the tree, Rodrigo smiled a smile that lit up the room. That smile paid for every penny, every sacrifice. Where was that boy now? At what moment did my son turn into that cold man who publicly humiliated me? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Teresa, my friend of 3 decades, worried after the events of the previous night. Márcia, how are you? I couldn't sleep thinking about you. I'm just existing, I replied honestly, still trying to understand what happened. What happened is that your son was a miserable ingrate. Teresa shot back, always direct. And that daughter-in-law? My God, what a family of vipers you've got. I couldn't help but smile, even amidst the sadness. Teresa had the gift of saying exactly what she thought, no filters. I'm coming over, she announced. Make more coffee. An hour later, sitting on the balcony of my apartment overlooking the sea in Florianopolis, I let out all the pain, all the disappointment. Teresa listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes cursing Rodrigo and the Mendonças. "Did you really cancel the house financing?" she asked when I finished my rant. "I did. I called the bank yesterday as soon as I got home." "And what do you plan to do now?" That was the question that had kept me awake all night. What would I do? At 67, after dedicating my whole life to my children, the university, my students, what was left for me? "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel like I've lost my purpose." Teresa took my hands in hers, looking me firmly in the eyes. "Márcia Vasconcelos, I've known you since college. You are the brightest, strongest woman I've ever met. You haven't lost your purpose. Perhaps for the first time in your life, you have the chance to discover what your true purpose is." Teresa's words planted a seed in my heart, and it was there, on that balcony, with the sea breeze tousling my gray hair, that I began to glimpse a new path. The following Monday, Vicente came to visit me. Unlike his brother, he had always been attentive, present. He brought an orange cake, my favorite, and sat down with me at the kitchen table. "Mom, about the marriage?" He started hesitantly. "We don't need to talk about that," I cut in, not wanting to relive the humiliation. "Yes, we do," Vicente insisted. "What Rodrigo did was unforgivable. I tried to talk to him after you left, but he was drunk, irrational, and that Camila didn't help at all. She kept whispering in his ear, poisoning him even more." I sighed deeply. In a way, I had been expecting something like this. Ever since Rodrigo started dating Camila 3 years ago, he had changed. At first, it was little things, canceling Sunday lunches, not returning calls, subtle comments about my way of dressing, my simple apartment. Then, the distance became more evident. He started going to expensive places, wearing designer clothes, acting as if he was ashamed of his roots. "He's always been ambitious," I commented, pouring more coffee for Vicente. "Since he was little, he wanted to be rich, to have things we couldn't give him. I think Camila and her family represent everything he's ever wanted." "That doesn't justify what he did," Vicente countered, the indignation clear in his voice. "Mom, you've been our foundation, our support since Dad died. You sacrificed everything for us. And now he treats you like this because of a family we don't even really know?" The mention of the Mendonças sparked curiosity in me. What did we really know about them? Camila said her father was a successful businessman in real estate in São Paulo. Her mother, a socialite who organized charity events. They flaunted wealth, power, connections, but there was something about them that always bothered me. An arrogance that seemed to hide something. "Vicente, have you heard of any scandals involving the Mendonças? Any news, rumors, anything?" My son furrowed his brow thoughtfully, "Not specifically, but I remember Rodrigo mentioning once that Mr. Mendonça had powerful contacts in Brasilia, that he could get quick approvals for his ventures." "Why?" "Curiosity," I replied, but my mind was already racing. After Vicente's visit, I called an old college friend, Clarice, who now worked at the state audit court. We arranged to meet for coffee the next day at Sabor de Serra, a discreet cafe in the city center. "Mendonça, the businessman from São Paulo," she repeated after I mentioned the name. "Márcia. This man has more lawsuits against him than I can count. Money laundering, bribery, overpricing in public works. But he always gets away with it, always. They say he has politicians in his pocket, judges too." My heart raced. So, there was something wrong with the Mendonças, just as I suspected. And what about their financial situation? Are they really as well off as they seem? Clarice looked around, as if checking if anyone was listening, and leaned in closer. "Among us, there are rumors that the empire is crumbling. Their latest ventures have lost money, and some investors are suing him for fraud, but they keep up appearances. You know how it is, imported cars, vacation homes, expensive jewelry." I left that cafe with my head buzzing with ideas. If the Mendonças were having financial troubles, why was Camila interested in Rodrigo? He was successful in his marketing career, sure, but he wasn't rich. Unless she knew about the house I was going to buy for them, unless she knew about my savings, the money I had set aside for decades. The next day, I did something I never imagined I would do. I hired a private investigator. Antonio was a former student of mine who had left academia to become an investigator. I explained the situation, leaving out some more personal details. I want to know everything about the Mendonças. And also, I hesitated for a moment. I want to know if my son, Rodrigo, has been doing anything I should know about. Antonio nodded without judgment. It will take time, Professor, and it won't be cheap. I have time, I replied. And what about the money? Well, I recently cancelled the purchase of a $2 million house. I think I can afford your fees. In the following weeks, I kept my routine. I went to the university, even though I was retired, to teach as a guest professor. I met with friends, read books, took care of the plants on the balcony. The wound of humiliation was still fresh, but something new was growing inside me. Determination. Rodrigo didn't try to reach out. Vicente told me that his brother and Camila had gone on their honeymoon in the Maldives, a gift from the Mendonças. They would be away for 3 weeks. On a rainy Wednesday, Antonio called me. Professor, we need to talk in person. We met at the same cafe as before. Antonio brought a folder full of documents, photos, reports. The expression on his face told me that what he had discovered wasn't good. The Mendonças are practically bankrupt. He began. Their latest venture, a resort in Angra dos Reis, was halted due to environmental irregularities. The investors want their money back, but there's no money. They are selling assets, mortgaging properties, all to keep up appearances. This confirmed what Clarice had told me. But there was more, much more. As for your son, Antonio hesitated, looking at me with compassion. Professor, I found something you need to see. He showed me copies of financing documents in my name, loans, credit cards, even a mortgage on my apartment. All perfectly forged. Rodrigo has been using your name to get credit, Antonio explained. From what I could gather, he is in deep debt. Gambling mostly, and in recent months he has been transferring large sums to the Mendonças' account. The world seemed to collapse around me. My own son stealing from me, forging my signature. For what? To impress a bankrupt family? To maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford? There's one more thing, Antonio continued. I found records that Rodrigo tried to expedite the financing process for the house you were going to buy for them. He had even used the contract as collateral for another loan. At that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't just ingratitude or arrogance, it was betrayal. My son had betrayed me in the most vile way possible. I thanked Antonio for his services. I paid what I owed and returned home in a daze. The rain fell mercilessly, soaking my clothes, but I barely felt it. The pain was so intense that it seemed to have numbed everything else. At home, I sat down again in the green velvet armchair. The tears I thought I had exhausted came back with full force. I cried for hours, until there were no more tears to shed. That's when the phone rang. It was Luia, the manager of the bank where I had cancelled the financing. Mrs. Márcia, I'm calling because there was an attempt to reactivate the house process today. Someone presented themselves as your attorney, with documents that seemed legitimate. My blood ran cold. I didn't authorize anyone to do that, I replied, my voice trembling. That's what I figured. That's why I blocked the process and decided to call you directly. Mrs. Márcia, if I may be bold, I think you should consider filing a police report. This is fraud. After hanging up, I sat still for long minutes. The idea of reporting my own son to the police was unthinkable, but what had he done? What was he trying to do? The phone rang again. It was Vicente. Mom, you won't believe it. Rodrigo and Camila came back from the Maldives earlier than expected. And they're telling everyone that they bought a house that you gave them as a gift. My breath caught for a moment. Vicente, your brother is stealing from me. He forged my signature on several documents, is putting me in debt, and now he's trying to reactivate the financing for the house I cancelled. Silence on the other end of the line. My God, Vicente finally spoke, his voice heavy with horror. What are we going to do? The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. What would I do? Report my son, confront him, allow him to keep stealing from me? It was then that an idea began to form in my mind. An idea that, at first, seemed absurd, unthinkable, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Vicente, do you remember that before I became an economics teacher, I worked at the public prosecutor's office? Vaguely? You never talked much about it because it was a job that required discretion. I was a financial consultant specializing in white-collar crimes. I helped uncover money laundering schemes, bank fraud, that kind of thing. There was another moment of silence as Vicente processed the information. Mom, what are you thinking of doing? I don't know exactly yet, I replied with a calm I didn't feel. But one thing is certain, I won't allow my own son to steal from me, to use me, to humiliate me. It's time for Rodrigo to meet the mother he really has. That night, as the storm battered Florianopolis, I made a call to another old friend, Paulo, who now worked at the federal police. We scheduled a meeting for the next day, and thus began my journey of discovery and revenge. A journey that would take me to places I never imagined visiting, that would lead me to make decisions I never thought I was capable of making. Because when a son calls his mother a piece of trash on his wedding day, he isn't just being cruel, he's revealing that he never really knew the woman who raised him. Paulo's office at the federal police was exactly as I imagined, organized, austere, with meticulously stacked files and a sea view rarely appreciated. He welcomed me with a warm hug, a reminder of the times we worked together at the public ministry. Márcia Vasconcelos. He smiled, gesturing to the chair in front of him. How long has it been? You haven't changed a bit, except for the wrinkles and gray hair. I joked, but my smile didn't reach my eyes. Paulo immediately sensed this wasn't a social visit. He knew me too well for that. What happened? He asked, his expression suddenly serious. I took a deep breath and placed the folder Antonio had given me on the table. As Paulo examined the documents, I recounted the recent events, the marriage, the public humiliation, the discovery of the fraud. My own son, my voice faltered momentarily, using my name to take out loans, forging my signature. And all for what? To fund a lifestyle he can't maintain? To impress a broke family? Paulo closed the folder, his eyes revealing a mix of compassion and indignation. This is serious, Márcia. We're talking about serious financial crimes, document forgery, fraud, possible criminal association with the Mendonças. Your son could face years in prison. The word prison echoed in my ears like a distant bell. The image of Rodrigo behind bars caused a pang of maternal pain that I tried to ignore. I didn't come here to report him, I clarified. At least not yet. I need information. I need to understand exactly who I'm dealing with. Paulo leaned forward, intrigued. What exactly do you want to know? Everything about the Mendonças. Their involvement in corruption schemes, their real financial situation, their political connections. I hesitated for a moment. I also want to know who bought the company where Rodrigo recently started working. I've heard rumors about foreign investors. Paulo raised an eyebrow, curious about my specific interest in the company, but he didn't question it. It'll take a few days, but I have access to databases that your private detective doesn't. I'll see what I can find. Before leaving, Paulo held my hand for a moment. Márcia, what are you planning? I know that look. It's the same one you had when we dismantled that corruption scheme in 1995. I smiled, a smile that carried no joy, only determination. I'm planning to teach a lesson about consequences, Paulo, about respect, about never underestimating a 67-year-old woman who was called worthless by her own son. In the following weeks, while waiting for information from Paulo, I decided to take other measures. My first stop was the bank where I had tried to finance the house for Rodrigo. Luia, the manager, welcomed me into her private office. She was young, probably in her 30s, but her eyes revealed sharp intelligence. Mrs. Márcia, as we discussed over the phone, we'd blocked all attempts to reactivate the financing, but I'm concerned. If someone is forging your signature, you could be at risk. That's why I'm here, I explained. I want to review all my accounts, investments, anything in my name, and I'm also interested in a position. Luia's confused expression made me smile. A position, she repeated, not understanding. Yes. I heard the bank is looking for senior consultants in the investment area. It turns out that before becoming a university professor, I worked at the public prosecutor's office as a specialist in financial crimes. I have some experience in identifying irregularities. The meeting with Luia stretched on for hours. By the end, not only had we protected all my accounts and investments, but I also had an interview scheduled with the regional bank director for the following week. As I left the bank, I found Teresa waiting at the corner cafe, just as we had agreed. So? She asked eagerly. Phase 1 of the plan is complete. I replied, ordering a strong coffee. Now I need your help for phase 2. Teresa leaned in, her eyes shining with curiosity. What do you need? I need you to contact that friend of yours who works at the real estate agency. I want to know if there are any specific properties for sale in Jura Internacional. Jura? But that's a millionaire's area, Márcia. The houses there cost a fortune. Exactly. I replied, a plan forming clearly in my mind. And there's one in particular that interests me. 3 days later, I received a call from Paulo. I have the information you requested. We should talk in person. We met on a deserted beach. Away from prying eyes, Paulo brought a complete dossier on the Mendonças. As we suspected, the family was practically bankrupt. The patriarch, Carlos Mendonça, had heavily invested in a luxury resort in Angra dos Reis, which was halted due to environmental irregularities. The investors were suing him, demanding the return of their capital. But the most interesting part, Paulo continued flipping through the dossier, is that we found evidence that Carlos Mendonça was using his daughter's wedding as part of a larger scheme. How so? I asked, intrigued. He knew about the house you were going to buy for the couple and understood that once the property was in Rodrigo and Camila's name, it could be used as collateral for a substantial loan. A loan that would apparently be used to pay off some of the more aggressive investors in the resort. My blood boiled as I realized the extent of the manipulation. It wasn't just Rodrigo using my name to get credit. It was an entire family using my son. And, by extension, me, as pieces in their desperate game to avoid financial ruin. And what about Rodrigo's company? I asked, trying to maintain my composure. Paulo smiled, a smile that indicated he had saved the most interesting information for last. Ah, this is fascinating. The company was acquired by an investment fund called Artemis Capital, a rather discreet fund based in the Cayman Islands. And who's behind this fund? Paulo handed me one last document. This, my dear Márcia, is something you'll have to figure out on your own, but I can tell you it's someone with connections in the financial and academic world. I looked at the document. A purchase and sale contract filled with complex legal terms and intricate financial clauses, but it was the name of the fund's legal representative that caught my attention, Dr. Eduardo Santos. Eduardo was a former student of mine, now a lawyer specializing in financial law, and he had been Rodrigo's best friend in college until they drifted apart for reasons my son never wanted to explain. I thanked Paulo for the information, promising to stay in touch. On my way home, my mind was racing, connecting the dots, formulating strategies. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with Eduardo at his office in the business center of Florianopolis. He welcomed me with the same respectful admiration as always, calling me professor, despite the years that had passed since I stopped being his mentor. Eduardo, I began after the initial formalities. I need your help with a delicate matter. I briefly explained the situation, omitting some more personal details. Eduardo listened attentively, his face showing growing indignation as I recounted the events. Rodrigo has always been ambitious, he commented when I finished. But I never imagined he would go this far. Forging his own mother's signature, using her name to get credit? People change, I replied simply, but I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm interested in the future, specifically in the fund, Artemis Capital. Eduardo adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. Professor, you know I can't discuss the office's clients. Eduardo, I gently interrupted. We both know that Artemis Capital is not just any client. It's a fund you helped structure, probably as a favor for someone. And I'm betting that someone is someone you respect a lot. The young lawyer stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. What exactly do you want to know? I want to know if there's room for one more investor in the fund. Someone with considerable resources and a particular interest in the recently acquired company. Eduardo's eyes widened, finally understanding. You want to invest in Artemis, but that would mean I would be indirectly owning the company where my son works. Exactly, I completed. A slow smile formed on Eduardo's face. Professor, I've always admired your intelligence, but I confess I've never seen you so strategic. Age brings wisdom, Eduardo, and occasionally a desire to settle scores. I left the office with a complete dossier on Artemis Capital and a meeting scheduled with the main investors for the following week. My plan was taking shape faster than I expected. Meanwhile, Vicente kept me informed about Rodrigo and Camila's movements. The couple had returned from their honeymoon and were temporarily staying at the Mendonça mansion in Jurerê Internacional while, according to them, the renovation of their new house was being completed. They're throwing a party this weekend, Vicente told me during one of our lunches. Something to celebrate 6 months of marriage. Everyone was invited, including Rodrigo's business partners. All the partners? I asked, a plan forming in my mind. Yes, it seems there have been recent changes in management. Rodrigo is trying to impress the new bosses. I smiled, imagining my son's expression when he found out who the new owners of the company really were. Vicente, I asked casually, were you invited to this party? I was, but I don't plan to go. After what Rodrigo did to you, I can't look at him without feeling anger. I think you should go, I suggested, surprising him. In fact, I think we both should go. Vicente looked at me as if I had suggested skydiving. Mom, you can't be serious after what he did, what he said. I'm very serious, I replied, my voice calm but firm. Sometimes, Vicente, the best revenge isn't to stay away from those who hurt us, it's to show up when they least expect it, with a smile on your face and a plan up your sleeve. My youngest son studied me for a moment, sensing a new determination in my eyes. A force that may have always been there, but circumstances had brought it to light. What are you planning, Mom? Justice. I replied simply, perhaps with a touch of dramatic poetry. The following week, I executed another part of my plan. The interview at the bank was a success, and I was hired as a senior investment consultant with a special focus on fraud detection. My previous experience at the public prosecutor's office, combined with my years as an economics teacher, made me the ideal candidate for the position. On my first day, I requested access to the records of all loans granted in recent years. It wasn't hard to find those that had been requested in my name. The forgery was flawless. Rodrigo always had a talent for mimicking my handwriting, but the spending patterns were obvious. Large sums transferred to Camila's account, substantial withdrawals at betting houses, purchases at luxury stores. I began meticulously building a case of bank fraud, gathering evidence, documenting suspicious transactions, not to report my son immediately, but to have ammunition when the right moment came. Meanwhile, I closed the deal with Artemis Capital. Using the savings I had accumulated over decades, the same ones meant to finance a house for Rodrigo, I bought a significant stake in the fund, effectively becoming one of the owners of the company where my son worked. Eduardo, impressed by my determination, became a valuable ally. He was the one who introduced me to the manager of the Mendonça mansion, revealing that the property was secretly for sale to pay off debts. They are desperate, Eduardo explained as we visited the property on a day we knew the family would be away. The bank is threatening to foreclose. They are asking well below market value, as long as the sale is quick and discreet. I walked through the mansion's luxurious rooms, observing the opulent details, crystal chandeliers, imported furniture, valuable artworks on the walls. Everything exuded wealth and sophistication, and it was all a facade, about to crumble. I will buy it, I decided right then, but with one condition. I want the sale to be finalized only after the 6-month wedding party. Eduardo raised his eyebrows, intrigued. Why? Let's just say I have a sense of dramatic timing, I replied with a mysterious smile. As the day of the party approached, I finalized the last details of my plan. With the help of Paulo from the federal police, I gathered all the necessary documentation about the Mendonça's frauds and Rodrigo's forgeries. With Eduardo's assistance, we ensured that representatives from Artemis Capital would be present at the party, ready to reveal who truly controlled the company now. The night before the party, I sat on my balcony, gazing at the sea of Florianopolis. I felt a strange calm, like the stillness before the storm. Tomorrow, I would face my son again. Tomorrow, he would discover that the mother he called trash was, in fact, a woman with resources, intelligence, and determination he had never imagined. My phone rang. It was Teresa. Is everything ready for tomorrow? She asked, concern evident in her voice. All set, I confirmed. Márcia, her voice turned serious. Are you sure you want to do this? Exposing Rodrigo publicly, destroying his marriage, ruining the Mendonças. It's quite a severe revenge. I paused for a moment, considering her words. It's not just about revenge, Teresa, it's about justice, about consequences for actions. Rodrigo and the Mendonças are not just using me. They are committing crimes, manipulating people, causing real harm. Someone needs to stop them. And that someone has to be you, his mother, especially because I am his mother. I replied, feeling a fierce determination in my voice. Who better to teach a lesson about respect and consequences than the person he thought he could humiliate without repercussions? After hanging up, I sat there for a long time, watching the stars over the ocean. Tomorrow, Rodrigo's world would come crashing down, and I would be there, not as the submissive and selfless mother he thought I was, but as Márcia Vasconcelos, the woman he never really knew, a woman who doesn't accept being called trash by anyone. The morning of the party dawned with an incredibly blue sky, as if even nature was conspiring in my favor. I spent hours getting ready, choosing every detail with meticulous care. I wouldn't wear a simple dress this time. For this special occasion, I invested in an elegant gray suit that gave me an authoritative look. I styled my gray hair in a flawless bun. I applied subtle makeup that highlighted my features. I completed the look with a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. A silent reminder of my heritage, of who I truly was. Vicente picked me up at 6 p.m. I noticed his approving gaze when he saw me. Mom, he whispered. You look different. Different how? I asked, adjusting my collar. Powerful, he simply replied, as if he were about to close a billion-dollar deal. I smiled, feeling a confidence I hadn't experienced in years. In a way, I was on my way to Jurera Internacional. Vicente tried once more to dissuade me. There's still time to back out, Mom. We can just go home, open a bottle of wine, forget all this. I looked out the window, watching the landscape of Florianopolis rush by. So many memories in this city, so many years dedicated to family, to students, to others, never to myself. No, Vicente, I replied firmly. Some things cannot be forgotten. Some lessons need to be taught. We arrived at the Mendonça mansion promptly at 7. The place was beautifully decorated for the occasion, with soft lights illuminating the garden, white flowers and elegant arrangements, waiters circulating with glasses of champagne. The elite of Florianopolis was present. Businessmen, politicians, socialites, all impeccably dressed, all part of a world I supposedly didn't belong to. At the entrance, we were greeted by a young man with a clipboard who checked our names on the guest list. Vicente was there, of course, as the host's brother. My name, as expected, was not on the list. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the young man said politely. "I don't see your name here." "Check again," I said calmly, unshaken. "Márcia Vasconcelos." "I've already checked, ma'am." "I'm sorry, but you might want to consult this list," I interrupted, extending a sealed envelope with the federal police letterhead. "I believe you'll find not only my name but others that may be of particular interest." The young man looked confused at the envelope, unsure of how to proceed. That's when Paulo, my friend from the federal police, appeared by my side as planned, accompanied by 2 uniformed agents. "Good evening," he introduced himself, showing his badge. "Delegate Paulo Ferreira, Federal Police. This lady is with me." The young man on the list visibly paled, taking a step back. "Of course, you can come in." We entered the mansion garden, where the party was already in full swing. The soft music from a live band filled the air, blending with the buzz of lively conversations. I spotted Eduardo Santos in a corner, chatting with a group of executives, the representatives from Artemis Capital, who had acquired Rodrigo's company. He saw me and gave a discreet nod, all according to plan. It wasn't long before Camila noticed us. She was animatedly talking with a group of friends, showcasing a golden dress that surely cost more than many people earn in a month. Her smile froze upon seeing us, transforming into a look of shock followed by disdain. She quickly approached, her posture tense, the social smile barely masking her irritation. "Vicente," she greeted, air-kissing near my son's face. Then she turned to me, her eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Márcia, what a surprise, I don't recall sending you an invitation." "You didn't," I replied calmly. "But some meetings don't need a formal invite, do they? Especially when they're family matters." Camila nervously glanced at the federal police agents beside me. "Who are these people? What's going on? Where's Rodrigo?" I asked, ignoring her question. "I have important matters to discuss with my son." Before Camila could respond, I saw Rodrigo emerging from the house, surrounded by a group of suited men, clearly the company's new partners. He was laughing loudly, displaying that artificial confidence he had developed since meeting Camila, until his eyes met mine. I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by an expression of pure shock. He stood still for a moment, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then he excused himself from the executives and walked toward us. His posture rigid, his face a mask of restraint. "Mom," he said as he approached. His voice controlled, but his eyes sparkled with anger. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Rodrigo," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "What a lovely party. Too bad they forgot to invite your mother." "It wasn't an oversight," he shot back, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "After what happened at the wedding, I thought it was clear that your presence isn't welcome in my life." I smiled, a calm smile that clearly unsettled him. "Oh, yes. When you called me trash, right? When you said you didn't need me around," I stepped closer, reducing the space between us. "Maybe you should have thought twice before using my name to secure fraudulent loans, Rodrigo." His face visibly paled. His eyes widened in panic, darting between me and the federal police agents, who remained discreetly a few steps away. "I don't know what you're talking about," he tried, but his voice trembled slightly. "I think you do," I continued. My voice still calm, but now carrying a note of steel, "just like you tried to reactivate the mortgage after I cancelled it using forged documents again." Camila, who had been watching our exchange with growing concern, intervened by touching her husband's arm. "Honey, what's going on? What is she talking about?" "Nothing," Rodrigo quickly replied. "My mom is confused. Maybe it's her age." He turned to me, his voice now an urgent whisper. "Please, just go. I'm trying to impress important people here. Don't make a scene." "Important people?" I repeated, slightly raising my voice. Like your new bosses, the representatives from Artemis Capital. Rodrigo frowned, confused. How do you know about that? It was at that moment that Eduardo approached, accompanied by the executives Rodrigo had been talking to. Professor Vasconcelos, Eduardo greeted with evident respect. I see you've met your son. Professor, one of the executives repeated, looking at me with renewed interest. So, you are Dr. Márcia Vasconcelos, the new majority investor in the fund. Rodrigo's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, horror. He looked from me to Eduardo, then to the executives, trying to process what was happening. Investor in what? What do you mean? Eduardo smiled, addressing Rodrigo with exaggerated formality. Your mother didn't tell you. She is now one of the main shareholders of Artemis Capital. In other words, he paused dramatically, she is your new boss. I watched Rodrigo's world crumble before my eyes. All the arrogance, all the false confidence draining from his face like makeup underwater. Camila grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his skin, her eyes wide with panic. What does this mean? She whispered urgently. Before Rodrigo could respond, Carlos Mendonça, Camila's father, joined the group. He was a burly man with gray hair and a face that exuded authority, the kind of man used to getting what he wants. What's going on here? He asked, looking suspiciously at the federal police agents. Paulo stepped forward, extending his hand. Delegate Paulo Ferreira, Federal Police. And you must be Carlos Mendonça. Carlos ignored the outstretched hand, his face hardening. What is the federal police doing in my house? This is a private party. Actually, Eduardo interjected with a polite smile, technically, this is no longer your house, Mr. Mendonça. A heavy silence fell over the group. Carlos looked at Eduardo as if he had just spoken in an alien language. What the hell are you talking about, kid? Eduardo pulled a document from his jacket and handed it to Carlos. This is the purchase and sale agreement for the mansion, signed by you 3 days ago. The property was sold to pay your debts to the bank. The new owner just allowed the party to happen before officially taking possession. Carlos examined the document, his face gradually turning red with fury. This is absurd. I would never sell my house without knowing who the buyer is. You were desperate, Eduardo replied, unperturbed. The bank threatened to foreclose on the mortgage. The sale was quick, discreet, and for the amount you set yourself, it's all perfectly legal. Who? Carlos demanded, his voice trembling with rage. Who bought my house? It was my turn to smile. I bought it, Mr. Mendonça. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Carlos was left speechless, unable to articulate a response. Camila let out a small gasp of surprise. And Rodrigo? Rodrigo looked like he had just seen a ghost. You? He finally managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. How? With the money I was going to use to buy the house for you? I simply replied. I thought it would be a more educational investment. Camila was the first to regain her composure, her face twisting into a mask of disdain. This is ridiculous. A retired teacher can't afford a mansion in Jura Internacional. Don't underestimate the power of disciplined saving, dear, I retorted, keeping my calm. Besides, I've always had a talent for investments that few know about. At that moment, Paulo stepped forward, opening a folder he had with him. Mr. Mendonça, we have a search and seizure warrant for this property. We are investigating allegations of tax fraud, money laundering, and active corruption. Carlos's face turned pale. He looked around frantically, like a cornered animal. This is absurd, a mistake. Isn't it? Paulo continued, turning to Rodrigo. Mr. Vasconcelos, we have substantial evidence that you forged your mother's signature on several financial documents, obtaining fraudulent loans in her name. This constitutes fraud and document forgery. The guests around us began to realize something was wrong. The music kept playing, but conversations faded, replaced by curious glances in our direction. I saw Julia Mendonça, Camila's mother, approaching with an alarmed expression. "Carlos," she called, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" Before anyone could respond, one of the federal police agents approached Paulo, whispering something in his ear. Paulo nodded gravely and turned to Carlos. "Mr. Mendonça, I ask that you accompany me. We have some questions to clarify at the station." "This is absurd?" Carlos protested, his voice rising in panic. "You can't do this. I have influential friends, contacts in Brasilia." "Your influential friends are being investigated in the same scheme, Mr. Mendonça," Paulo replied, unfazed. "In fact, many of them are already cooperating with the authorities in exchange for reduced sentences." It was as if a bomb had exploded at the party. The closest guests overheard the exchange and began to whisper among themselves. Within minutes, the news spread through the garden. I saw shocked faces, expressions of disbelief, people discreetly stepping away, not wanting to be associated with the impending scandal. Rodrigo took a step toward me, his face a mask of fury and despair. "Why are you doing this, Mom? Why are you destroying my life?" I looked directly into my son's eyes, unwavering. "The day you called me trash at your wedding, you weren't just rejecting your mother, you were sealing your own fate." Camila grabbed Rodrigo's arm, pulling him away from me. "Let's get out of here," she hissed. "Now where to?" I asked with false innocence. "To the house you claim to have bought, the one that never actually existed? Or to the apartment in Balneario Camboriú, whose rent is 2 months overdue?" Camila's eyes widened in shock. She turned to Rodrigo, her face twisted in accusation. "You said you had paid the rent. You promised that everything was under control." As the couple argued, Paulo led Carlos Mendonça out, followed by agents carrying boxes of confiscated documents. Julia ran after them, her face twisted with panic, begging for explanations. The party was effectively ruined. Guests began to discreetly leave, not wanting to be associated with the spectacle of public disgrace unfolding. The band stopped playing. The waiters disappeared backstage. The garden lights seemed to dim. It was at that moment, with chaos around me, that I spoke up again. I didn't shout, I didn't need to. My voice, clear and firm, cut through the buzz of alarmed conversations. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, capturing the attention of those who remained. "I apologize for the inconvenience. It was not my intention to ruin this lovely gathering." Eduardo positioned himself beside me, offering a glass of champagne, which I accepted with a grateful smile. "In fact," I continued, "I would like to take this opportunity to make an announcement. This property I have just acquired will be transformed into a shelter for elderly victims of financial abuse, a place where those betrayed by those who should protect them can find refuge, support, and justice." A murmur of approval swept through the small crowd. I saw expressions of respect, even admiration, replacing the initial shock. "I invite you to return here in 3 months for the official opening," I concluded, raising my glass. "It will be a celebration of resilience, dignity, and yes, justice." As the remaining guests applauded politely, I turned my attention to Rodrigo and Camila. My son looked devastated, all arrogance gone, replaced by an expression of utter defeat. Camila, on the other hand, glared at him with a mix of disgust and accusation. "I'll let you two sort out your marital issues in private," I said, stepping closer. "But first, Rodrigo, I have something to tell you." He lifted his emotionless eyes. "The federal police have enough evidence to arrest you right now. The crimes you committed against me are serious, punishable by years in prison." I saw panic grow in his gaze, but I continued. "I've decided to give you a choice. You can cooperate with the investigation, confess your crimes, return the money you fraudulently obtained, and accept the legal consequences of your actions. Or you can try to run, hide, and continue living in the lie until you are inevitably caught." Rodrigo swallowed hard, his gaze shifting between me and the agents waiting at a discreet distance. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Why are you giving me this choice?" I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man he had become, and felt a complex mix of emotions, disappointment, sadness, but also a strange hope that despite everything, I am still your mother, and I believe that somewhere inside you, the son I once knew still exists, the one who will one day recognize his mistakes and find his way back to the person he should be. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving Rodrigo with his choices, with the consequences of his actions. Vicente caught up with me, putting his arm around my shoulders in a gesture of silent support. "Mom," he murmured as we left the ruined party behind. "You are amazing." I smiled, feeling a strange peace envelop me. The revenge had been executed, not with shouts of anger or acts of violence, but with calculated precision, with the quiet strength of a woman who had finally embraced her power. "No, Vicente," I replied, gazing at the starry sky over Jurera Internacional. "I'm just Márcia Vasconcelos, the woman your brother never really knew." The morning after the party, I woke up with a strange sense of lightness. I opened the curtains in my room and let the sun of Florianopolis flood the space. The view of the sea was particularly beautiful that day, as if nature was celebrating my newly discovered freedom with me. I prepared my usual breakfast, whole grain bread, white cheese, a fruit, and strong coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, opening the newspaper. As expected, the headline featured the federal police operation at the Mendonça mansion, a businessman from São Paulo arrested in Florianopolis on suspicion of fraud and corruption. The title read, "The article mentioned the interrupted party, Carlos's arrest, the evidence found." It didn't mention my name thanks to Paulo's description, but the details were enough for anyone present to connect the dots. My phone didn't stop ringing all morning. Teresa was the first to call, eager for details the newspaper didn't provide. "Was it exactly as you planned?" she asked, barely containing the excitement in her voice. "Better," I replied, feeling a smile form on my lips. The expression on Rodrigo's face when he found out I was his new boss was priceless. "And what happened to him? Was he arrested too?" I took a sip of my coffee before answering. "No. I gave him a choice, cooperate or run. And he chose." "I still didn't know," I admitted. "I left him there with Camila, amidst the ruins of the ruined party." What he decided to do after that? Well, we'll find out soon. I didn't have to wait long. Around 2 in the afternoon, I received a call from Paulo. His son was here this morning, he informed me without preamble. He confessed everything, the forgeries, the fraudulent loans, even the attempt to reactivate the house financing. I felt a knot form in my throat. Despite everything, a part of me, the part that would always be a mother, felt a pang of pain imagining Rodrigo in a police station confessing his crimes. "And now?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "He's cooperating with the investigations into the Mendonças," Paulo explained, offering information in exchange for a possible sentence reduction. "It seems his son knows much more about his father-in-law's schemes than he let on." "Is he going to prison?" The question slipped from my lips before I could contain it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Probably yes, Márcia. The crimes are serious, but with cooperation, a spontaneous confession, and if he really provides valuable information, he might get a semi-open regime or even an alternative sentence." I thanked Paulo for the information and hung up, feeling strangely empty. The revenge had been sweet, yes, but now, in the silence of my apartment, far from the heat of adrenaline, I realized it also carried a bitter taste. By the end of the afternoon, I was surprised by an unexpected visit. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, I found Camila standing in the hallway. She seemed like a shadow of the arrogant woman from the night before, without makeup, with deep dark circles, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, probably the simplest outfit I had ever seen her in. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Camila walked into the living room, looking around as if she were seeing the place for the first time. Maybe she really was. In the few times she had been there, she always seemed to evaluate everything with disdain, never truly observing. "It's a nice apartment," she commented, stopping in front of the shelf where I kept my family photos. "Cozy. Thank you, I replied, keeping my distance. What's behind this, Camila? She turned to me, and I saw that her eyes were red from crying. I came to apologize, she said, the words sounding strange on her lips. For how I treated you. For everything. I crossed my arms, unconvinced. Why now? Why is your father in jail? Because he found out the money is gone? Because he realized your husband is a criminal? Camila lowered her eyes, a blush of shame coloring her cheeks. For all of that, she admitted. And because Rodrigo told me what he did? How he forged your signature, how he gave me gifts bought with money that wasn't his, how he lied to me too. She raised her eyes and I saw a genuine vulnerability that I had never noticed before. I was always told that money was everything. Her voice trembled. I grew up hearing my father say that people were only worth what they had in the bank, that friendships, love, respect, everything could be bought for the right price. Camila walked to the window, looking out at the distant sea. When I met Rodrigo, I saw in him the same ambition my father had, the same willingness to do whatever it took to gain status and wealth. I thought we shared the same values. She let out a bitter laugh. What irony. To discover that the values we shared were, in fact, the absence of them. I watched my daughter-in-law in silence, trying to reconcile the image of the arrogant woman I knew with this broken, vulnerable version. What will you do now? I finally asked. Camila took a deep breath before answering. I don't know. My father is in jail. My mother is collapsing, taking sedatives just to function. Our home? Well, now it's yours. And Rodrigo? She swallowed hard. Rodrigo confessed his crimes and is cooperating with the police. He asked me for a divorce this morning. That took me by surprise. He asked for a divorce. Camila nodded slowly. She said he needed to take responsibility for his actions, that he couldn't keep living a lie, that he needed to find his way back to the person he was supposed to be. She looked directly at me, her exact words. I felt a wave of emotion hit me. My son had listened. Somehow, amidst all the chaos, my words had reached that part of him that I still believed existed. Camila, I said, softening my voice. Why did you really come here today? She hesitated, as if gathering courage. Then she said, I came to ask for your help, not money, she quickly added. I know I don't deserve it. I came to ask for guidance. You rebuilt your life after you became a widow. She raised 2 children on her own, built a respectable career, and saved enough to buy a mansion in Jura Internacional. She gave a sad smile. I think I have a lot to learn from you. I admit I was momentarily speechless. Of all the twists the last few days had brought, this was perhaps the most unexpected. Camila Mendonça asking for my guidance. Why should I help her? I asked, still cautious. After how she treated me? After how she turned my son against me? Camila nodded, accepting my distrust as fair. You have no reason to help me, she acknowledged. I don't deserve your kindness. But she hesitated, then continued with surprising honesty. But you are the only person I know who has the strength and integrity to do what you did yesterday. The only one who managed to take down my father, something many tried and failed. And if there's anyone who can teach me to be a better person, to build a life based on something more solid than appearances, it's you. I was silent for a long moment, assessing her. Was there sincerity in her words, or was it just another manipulation, a desperate attempt to find a new protector now that her world had crumbled? I'll think about it, I finally replied. I can't promise anything right now. Camila seemed to accept that as a better response than she expected. She headed for the door but paused before leaving. Rodrigo asked me to tell you something. She said, turning around. He wanted me to say he's sorry, that he doesn't deserve your forgiveness, but he will spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of it again. After Camila left, I sat in my green velvet armchair, trying to process everything that had happened. The last 24 hours had been an emotional roller coaster, unlike anything I had ever experienced before, from executing my revenge to the collapse of the Mendonça Empire, from Rodrigo's confession to Camila's sudden transformation. And now, what would come next? The answer began to form the following week when I started preparing to turn the Mendonça mansion into a shelter. I hired architects to redesign the spaces, lawyers to establish a foundation that would manage the place, and social workers specialized in cases of financial abuse against the elderly. During this process, I received a call from Eduardo Santos. "Professor," he began with that respectful tone he always used with me. "I have a proposal for you. The Artemis Capital Fund is interested in expanding its investments in the social sector. We are considering creating a specific division to fund initiatives like your shelter, and we would like you to lead this division." The proposal caught me by surprise. I had gotten used to thinking of myself as a teacher, as a mother, never as an executive of an investment fund. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you have shown a rare combination of financial intelligence and social awareness," Eduardo replied promptly. "And if I may be bold, because you are living proof that it's never too late to reinvent yourself." I asked for a few days to think, but deep down, I already knew my answer. At 67, I was about to start a new chapter in my life, one I could never have predicted. The following month, as preparations for the shelter progressed, I received permission to visit Rodrigo. He was being held in a federal police unit, awaiting trial. "Your collaboration has been invaluable to the investigations into Carlos Mendonça's schemes, which turned out to be far more extensive and complex than we initially imagined." The visiting room was simple, with a metal table and 2 chairs. When Rodrigo entered, escorted by a guard, I barely recognized him. He was thinner, with unshaven stubble, his eyes sunken from weeks of poor sleep. But there was something different in his gaze, a clarity I hadn't seen in a long time. "Mom," he said simply, sitting down in front of me. "Son," I replied, studying his face. "How are you?" He gave a sad smile, considering the circumstances better than I deserved. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between us. "I'm so sorry," he finally said, the words coming out with difficulty. "For what I said at the wedding, for how I treated you, for everything I did." "Why, Rodrigo?" I asked the question that had tormented me for months. "Why forge my signature? Why steal from me? I would have given you money if you needed it, I always did." Rodrigo looked down, shame evident on his face. "At first, it was to impress Camila and her family. They were so rich, so powerful. I wanted to show that I could provide that lifestyle too." He sighed deeply, then continued, "Then it was because of gambling debts. I started betting to try to recover the money I spent on Camila, on gifts, fancy restaurants, but it only got worse. Then Carlos found out and started using me." "Using you how?" I asked. "He was broke, but no one knew. He had to keep up appearances at all costs. When he discovered my methods for getting money, he offered me a deal. He would help me hide the fraud if I kept bringing in funds and shared with him." "And you accepted?" It wasn't a question, but Rodrigo felt it nonetheless. "I accepted because I was desperate, because I was a coward, because he hesitated, because part of me liked belonging to that world, being accepted by Camila's family, moving in their circles, even if it was all based on lies." I asked, trying to understand, especially since it was based on lies. Rodrigo replied, surprising me with his honesty. "It was like a game, you know? Seeing how far I could go, how much I could deceive people." His voice faltered, until the game became too real and I realized the person I was deceiving the most was myself. I looked at my son, trying to reconcile the boy I had raised with the man in front of me, where I had gone wrong, what I could have done differently. As if reading my thoughts, Rodrigo reached out his hand across the table, not touching me, but offering the gesture. "It wasn't your fault, Mom. None of this was your fault. You gave me everything. Love, education, values. I was the one who chose to ignore all of that. I was the one who chose the wrong path." I felt tears forming in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "And now?" I asked. What happens to you? Rodrigo straightened his shoulders, a gesture that reminded me of when he was a child preparing to face a challenge. Now I face the consequences of my actions. I continue to cooperate with the investigations. I try to reduce the damage I caused, and he looked directly into my eyes, and I try every day to become someone you can be proud of again. As I left the visit, I found Vicente waiting in the parking lot. He had insisted on accompanying me, worried about my emotional state after the meeting with Rodrigo. How did it go? He asked, opening the car door for me. Tough, I admitted, but necessary. On the way home, I told Vicente about the visit, about Rodrigo's apparent transformation, about my conversation with Camila, about the Artemis Fund proposal. That's a lot happening all at once, Vicente commented, concerned. Are you sure you want to take all this on? The shelter, the work at the fund? You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Mom. I looked out the window, watching the city go by. Florianopolis seemed different now. Or maybe it was me seeing everything with new eyes. I'm not trying to prove anything, I replied with a certainty that surprised me. I'm finally living as I always should have. As Márcia Vasconcelos, not just as a mother, as a teacher, as a widow, as myself, with all the abilities I've always had but rarely used fully. 3 months later, the new Dawn shelter was officially inaugurated. The old Mendonça mansion had been completely transformed. The ostentatious spaces gave way to welcoming and functional environments. The extravagant pool was replaced by a therapeutic garden. The luxurious suites became comfortable rooms for the elderly residents. The inauguration event brought together authorities, press, and representatives from social organizations. Vicente was by my side when I cut the symbolic ribbon. Eduardo and the Artemis Fund team occupied the front row of guests. Paulo and his colleagues from the federal police attended as honored guests. Even Camila was present. In the weeks after our conversation, she had started volunteering for the project, initially with simple tasks, then taking on greater responsibilities as she showed genuine commitment. It was strange, yes, to see my daughter-in-law transformed, but also inspiring to witness how people can change when confronted with the truth about themselves. After the ceremony, as guests mingled around the space, I found a moment of solitude in the garden. I sat on a bench, gazing at the sea in the distance, reflecting on everything that had happened since that night at Rodrigo's wedding. The public humiliation, the discovery of the frauds, the meticulously executed revenge plan, the collapse of the Mendonça family, Rodrigo's, and Camila's unexpected transformation. And finally, my own rebirth as a woman who would no longer let anyone diminish her. I felt a presence beside me and turned to find Teresa, holding 2 glasses of champagne. A toast to the most incredible woman I know, she said, handing me one of the glasses. I smiled, accepting the toast. Life surprises us when we least expect it. So it's true? Teresa asked, sitting down beside me. Are you really going to take over the social division of the Artemis Fund? I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. At 67, I'm about to become an executive at an investment fund. Who would have thought? I would, Teresa replied promptly. I always knew you were capable of much more than you allowed yourself to achieve. We sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the sea breeze, the distant buzz of the party, the feeling that something important had been accomplished. You know what's most ironic about all this? I finally asked. What? When Rodrigo called me worthless at that wedding, he thought he was belittling me, destroying me. He could never imagine that those cruel words would be the catalyst for the greatest transformation of my life. Teresa raised her glass again. Life begins at 67. Life begins when we decide it's time to truly live it. I corrected myself by toasting with my friend. As the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky of Florianopolis with shades of orange and pink, I reflected on the strange path that brought me here. Pain had turned into purpose, humiliation into strength, revenge into justice, and finally, into something resembling redemption. I was Márcia Vasconcelos. Not just a mother, not just a teacher, not just a widow, a complete, complex, capable woman. And in that moment, for the first time in many years, I felt truly at peace with who I was. My dear ones, this was my story, a story of pain, betrayal, but also of rebirth and redemption. When my own son called me worthless on his wedding day, in front of all the guests, I felt as if my world had collapsed. After years of sacrifices, saving every penny to give him and his brother a decent life, giving up my own dreams so they could achieve theirs, that public humiliation felt like the final blow in a life of selflessness, but something within me awakened at that moment. A strength that perhaps had always been there, dormant, waiting for the right moment to manifest. When I cancelled the financing for the house I was going to buy for him, it wasn't just a reaction to the humiliation, it was the first step of a journey that would lead me to rediscover who I really was. The discovery of the fraud was painful. Knowing that my own son had forged my signature to obtain loans, that he was stealing from me, that he had become an accomplice of a corrupt family, the Mendonças, was one of the hardest moments of my life. For a brief moment, I questioned everything. Where had I gone wrong in raising my children? What could I have done differently? But instead of sinking into guilt and self-pity, I decided to take action. I used my skills as a former financial consultant for the public ministry, my knowledge as an economics teacher, and devised a plan. Not a plan driven solely by revenge, although that was the initial spark, but a plan to restore justice, to show my son and myself that no one has the right to belittle me, to call me worthless, to treat me as if I were insignificant. The execution of the revenge at the wedding celebration was meticulously planned. Every detail was thought out to create the greatest impact possible. The revelation that I had become the owner of the company where Rodrigo worked, the arrival of the federal police with warrants against the Mendonças, the discovery that I had bought the mansion where the party was taking place, all was orchestrated to show who I really was. Not just the submissive mother they thought they knew, but Márcia Vasconcelos in all her complexity and strength. The turnaround that followed exceeded my expectations. Seeing Rodrigo confess his crimes, starting a process of genuine redemption was something I hadn't anticipated. The transformation of Camila, from an arrogant daughter-in-law to a young woman seeking guidance, also surprised me. And most importantly, my own transformation from a retired teacher to an executive at an investment fund, from a dedicated mother to a fully realized woman, has been the greatest turnaround of all. The Novo Amanhasser shelter has become my most precious legacy. Turning the mansion that symbolized the empty ostentation of the Mendonças into a welcoming space for elderly victims of financial abuse was the most poetic way to close this chapter. Each elderly person who finds shelter and support there is a living proof that it's possible to transform pain into purpose, humiliation into dignity. Today, at 67, I can say that I am living the fullest phase of my life. As an executive in the social division of Artemis Capital, I have the opportunity to expand my work, to create more shelters, to help more people. Vicente remains by my side, a dedicated and loving son. Rodrigo, even facing the legal consequences of his actions, is on a genuine path of redemption. And I, Márcia Vasconcelos, finally feel complete, not as a mother, not as a teacher, not as an executive, but as a woman. If you are watching this video and relate to my story, I want you to know, it's never too late to start over. It's never too late to discover your inner strength. It's never too late to show the world and yourself who you really are. The path is not easy. There will be pain, there will be tears, there will be moments when you question if you are doing the right thing. But if you stay true to your values, if you don't let others define your worth, if you believe in your capacity for transformation, I can assure you that the journey is worth it. I am immensely grateful for your support up to this point. Telling this story wasn't easy, reliving each moment, each emotion, each twist, but I felt it was important to share, not just as a personal catharsis, but as a testimony of overcoming that can inspire others. If my story touched your heart, if in some way it resonated with your own experiences, I ask you to leave a comment. I would love to know what you thought, what you felt, if you've been through something similar. Dialogue is a powerful form of healing, and your comments are a fundamental part of this process. I also ask you to like this video. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it means a lot to us on the channel. Each like is a recognition of the hard work we do to bring these real, emotional, and transformative stories to you. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please consider subscribing now and activating the notification bell. We have many more stories to share, many more journeys of overcoming, many more testimonies that can inspire, comfort, and motivate. By subscribing, you ensure that you won't miss any of our videos and become part of this special community we are building. Producing quality content like this takes time, dedication, and resources. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support us so we can continue bringing more accounts like this daily, consider helping us with a contribution through Value Demace, our way of receiving donations. Every contribution, no matter how small, makes a huge difference in keeping the channel active and with frequent content. Your financial support helps us cover the costs of production, editing, and research needed to bring authentic and impactful stories like mine. In the upcoming videos, I will share other equally exciting and transformative stories. Stories of ordinary people who, in the face of extraordinary situations, discovered inner resources they didn't even know they had. Because that's who we are on this channel, storytellers sharing real tales that showcase the incredible human ability to overcome. I want to close with a final thought. When my son called me worthless at that wedding, he thought he was belittling me. Little did he know those cruel words would spark the greatest transformation of my life. Sometimes, it's in our biggest falls that we find the drive to soar the highest. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, you are so much stronger, so much more capable, so much more valuable than anyone has ever made you believe. As my own mother used to say, other people's opinions of you do not define who you are. Only your actions hold that power. I look forward to your comments, your likes, your subscriptions, and I hope to see you in the next video on the channel, where we will continue sharing stories that touch hearts, transform lives, and reveal the incredible power of human resilience. Until next time, with much love. Márcia Vasconcelos. M.